I think, live for the second 2023 Town of Webster Board Budget Workshop of this year. It's the early bird special starting at 4:30, I guess. And tonight, or this afternoon, I should say, we have 8 department heads presenting, and we will, without further ado, we'll start with Dolly McGuire, who is our town clerk, and the official title is tax collector, Dolly? Receiver. Tax receiver. That sounds a lot better, doesn't it? Yeah.
It's my official title.
Right. We'll go right ahead.
Okay. So I'll start with the tax collection portion of the budget. In regard to personnel, there are 3 employees in this department. There is a part-time tax clerk, a part-time clerk, and a full-time tax clerk. Under computer equipment and licensing, this is a new line item. I'm requesting replacement of 2 computers that are currently 6 years old, and this figure also includes 3 Microsoft Office licenses. Printing and postage is for school and property taxes. There is an increase of $2,650. This looks like a larger increase than it actually is. In the past, when the school district reimbursed the town for tax collection expenses, the reimbursement was applied to the expense line item. Moving forward, the reimbursement will be posted as a revenue. In regards to department expenses, which include supplies, equipment, maintenance, and legal notices, again, the same reason, reimbursement from the school district will be posted as a revenue instead of applying it to the expense. That's why you're seeing that increase. Under the revenue portion of that, interest and penalties on taxes, there's a decrease of $5,000. Based on the last couple of years of collection, interest and penalties on taxes is closer to the $180,000. So then under town clerk department, town clerk staffing is comprised of a full-time deputy clerk, a full-time licensed fees clerk, and a part-time receptionist. So if you're looking at the part-time personnel line item and the town clerk compensation employees, you'll see an increase in part-time personnel and a decrease in compensation employees. Last year, you approved the hiring of a full-time receptionist. That did not happen. We did interview, but we were unable to find anyone interested in working full-time. We did, however, find someone that was willing to work part-time. That's working out well, so we've returned to keeping the position part-time and backfilling with the town clerk staff. Computer equipment and licensing, again, this is another new line item. I'm requesting replacement of 4 computers. We have 2 computers that are 4 years old, 1 computer that's 7 years old, and 1 computer that's 8 years old. And the figure also includes 5 software licenses. Under printing and advertising, this includes legal notices and general code supplements. There's a decrease of $1,500. This amount was reduced based on the last 2 years of activity. Postage is postage for all the departments within the town. A decrease of $3,600. I reduced the amount based on the last year's activity, and also I allocated tax postage under tax collection. Office supplies and records management, no change. There is a slight increase to machine, computer, and contractual, a slight increase to payroll time recording software, no change to subscription and publications, and that's actually, that line item is used for general E-code, and that's the electronic version of the town code found on the town's website. A slight increase for conference and transportation, decrease of $525 for Easy Passes. We saw a spike in the purchase of Easy Passes when the toll booths were first removed, but now we find these purchases are leveling off. Under revenue, You're going to see a lot of increases and decreases in each line item. That's because revenues have been reclassified based on the state comptroller's chart of accounts. But overall, there's an increase of $2,375, which is mostly due to recognizing the school district's tax collection reimbursement as a revenue. And then under elections, you'll find there are no expenses or revenues listed this year or for 2023, and that's because the county has now taken over this function. Does anyone have any questions?
All in all, our budget was pretty flat year to year, so.
Yeah. Nice job, Dolly.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
A comment and a question, real quick. When you described the pretty robust research or search that was done by Brayton and you for a full-time receptionist and how it all played out, one thing that you're not noting is, as a team player, Dolly, we worked out something where you went to part-time with that and gave that full-time position, if you want to say, in the budget to engineering and community development. Is that essentially what happened, Paul?
Correct.
And I can't stress this enough. That's a team player, because it's, you know, you could look at this process as, this is my department, I'm just going to fight for what's my department, and I'm not going to work with other departments and stuff. Dolly, you lead by example, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Second thing, and if you don't know the answer to this, but it's dog licenses fees. I mean, I know what the revenue is here. Isn't it like $7 to $10 a dog annually?
It's $10 if the dog is spayed or neutered. If it is not, then it's $20.
Okay, even better. We kind of think that we don't have every dog in this town licensed.
We do not.
And do you have an idea? Well, based on that numbers, we kind of can guess how many dogs are licensed. Is it 3,500 at $10, 1,700 dogs at 20, so it's probably somewhere in the middle.
Possibly.
We have about 2,000 dogs licensed, something like that.
I would have to do some
Jenny, you
research
went
to
door
give
to
you
door a
that.
lot campaigning, right? Patty, you did too. You think we got more than 2,000 dogs in this town, Patty and Jenny?
They have a lot of dogs. I mean, we have a lot of dogs, but they all look like they have, you know, tags and
Yeah.
so I don't.
I don't know. John, I didn't say you because you haven't campaigned in a couple of years, but you know.
Well,
I
there's a
can
lot of
certainly
dogs.
get
There's a lot
back
of
to you with that
dogs.
number.
And it's interesting. I mean, you know, it's something we'll talk about, because it's not a minimal amount of money. If half the dogs aren't licensed, then we're basically talking about another $35,000 or $40,000.
Maybe time to do another dog census, which I understand there was one done in the past.
We'll talk.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Dolly.
Thank you, Dolly.
Next up, he's behind the beam, isn't there? He is, and he's a big man, so that beam is big. Steve Peace, who is our information technology manager.
All right, let's see here. As you can see, we get directory salary, network technician, and actually employee compensation help desk, which actually I need to get a hold of you, Paul, because I've been working with Brayton on that, and we finally canvassed a list and extended an offer. Gentleman will be starting in the end of this month. But so that number will need to be adjusted though, because the pay scale doesn't quite match what we budgeted last year.
Just did the calculation before I headed over here.
Yep. So that number will need to be adjusted. Off the top of my head, I don't know what that is.
It's gonna be around 41,000.
Oh, around 41,000, about a $6,000 increase
Yeah.
over what we budgeted last year. Because for payroll, those are just last year's numbers. So capital purchases, we'll actually get to that one, saving that one for last. As you can see, director's expenses, office supplies, smartphone, they're all pretty much the same. Computer system technical support, we did drop one contract that I just felt wasn't worth the money anymore. We have some spare equipment laying around, so if something happens, we do have a course of action without that support contract. Director's expenses, $500, website design and maintenance. That is only there because I have one domain name that we have registered, they still have to pay for every year. Other than that, normally Karen has taken over most of that, so all that money's been moved over to the cable access budget. And then our cell tower rent, it's gone up slightly. As time progresses with our agreements, they do increase our rent. It's been pretty flat over the years, but there's a slight increase, you know, inflation, cost of building services, all that good stuff. So the one budget line we got left is capital purchases. As you can see, that shows a dramatic decrease. After meeting with members of Tom and the management team here in the organization, as you've probably heard from a couple of people already, a lot of people have a new budget line for computer purchases and technology purchases in the department. We've decided that it's a better reflection of how the departments are spending money in technology to give them the ability to budget for and plan themselves on the front end pieces for technology. So they basically like their computers, their monitors, their printers, the office licensing, things of that nature. So in the interest of keeping my budget as flat as possible, I took last year's expenses and removed that from my budget and then planned my budget accordingly. And that's why you see such a dramatic, $60,000 decrease in that budget line. So to try to keep my budget as flat as possible, it actually shows a decrease, but in actuality, it's pretty flat from last year. Just I've since removed all those purchases that the departments now are budgeting for themselves out of my budget. So that's why there's that one large decrease in my budget line. But beyond that, that's pretty much it. It's pretty flat. I try to do my best to keep it that way. Actually, I think if you do the math, it might come out like maybe $1,000 under last year.
Yeah. Pretty flat.
Any comments or questions?
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Steve.
No, thanks, Steve.
Good job.
Steve, we own a couple cell towers, but we still do pay rent.
Yes.
How does that work? Explain that to us. Are there
It's
other towers that we don't
it's a unique situation. We own the property that the cell tower sits on, and the cell tower companies pay us rent to have the cell towers there.
Okay.
But then they own the tower itself, and they rent out the space by foot up on the tower itself. So they pay us rent, and then we pay them rent, and then
Yeah.
in actuality, we get a percentage of
Right.
their rent that comes back. And
Right, because there is revenue that comes in.
there's
every
revenue that comes in from that.
Yeah.
It's not reflected in my budget because it's part of the properties and things of that
month. Part
nature.
of general fund.
Right, but we do pay rent, but actually, since we're a customer, I think a percentage of our rent comes back to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
lots of finance stuff, I can't balance a checkbook, so.
It's complicated. I analyzed it a couple years ago to get a handle on it.
Yeah.
It is complicated, and those companies are always changing hands too. The names,
Right.
every 2 years, the names change. It's a little tough to follow.
To protect the innocent, they change.
That's right.
That's right. Well, luckily, the one is Crown Castle, they're pretty much the 800-pound gorilla in the room. They haven't changed much, but the Highway Tower, that's a smaller company, so they've changed names a couple times. I know that my vouchers say one thing, and the bill says another, and it's, yeah.
Well, and the only other thing I'll say is that, and we've talked about this in some of the budget meetings, is that the one-year budget cycle doesn't reflect, one of the things we're trying to accomplish here is that when we moved like Munis and Finance and Rec Track, which I'm sure, well, Chris, you went last week and
Yep.
explained. When you move those out to the cloud, it's going to have a positive effect on this budget in years to come because you won't have to buy servers and
Well, actually,
all that stuff.
it actually did it already, it made it much easier to keep my budget flat.
Yeah.
Because we do need to do server upgrades, but by moving Rec Track off, we'd be able to put it off another year. We're gonna move Munis off this year.
Right.
So we're kind of, instead of having to buy 2 servers next year, we may only have to buy 1. So it's already a big benefit to the IT department, helping us keep that budget flat.
Sure. Thanks, Steve.
Yep, thanks.
Thanks, Steve.
Well, we're ahead of schedule. Let's see, we probably are gonna need it because up next is Art Patron out there. Is he behind the beam now? And here he
Yes.
comes. For one of the smaller budget departments, right? The sanitary sewer plant and collection system, which Art, is now going to be called a water recovery, what's it called again?
Water Resource Recovery Facility.
I'm gonna get that down, Art.
I like that name.
The only
So
way
do
it's
I.
smaller is the fewer employees who are down there behind the scenes, working furiously so that everything flows correctly.
Patty, I hope everybody knew I was being sarcastic about being a small company, or small department. It is one of the larger ones in town, so have at it, Art.
Alrighty, we're gonna hit the highlights today. We're gonna start right with summer help. Summer help is increased. Our foreman will be retiring. We're working to keep him 3 days a week for 26 weeks next year. That'll be a key benefit to have him during construction, and also continue training our current staff. Compensation for employees, G8120 10142. This is an additional one laborer for the sewer department. This will keep us going, really give us the ability to get our flush truck out and maintain the mains and laterals within the town. Whereas right now we're struggling with that, with the amount of stakeouts we're doing. We're actually doing well on doing some maintenance item and so forth, but we need that extra labor to be able to keep that truck on the road. Monroe County sewer rents actually decreased, G81240335. That is part of the sandbar project. As people keep tying in, we'll see, as we get to capacity, we'll see less people tying in, and that's what that is reflecting. Paul, we're going to skip right down. Everything else is pretty well flat. To heavy equipment repair. And you'll see that increased from 14,000 to 24,500. That is the trend we're seeing with our flush truck. It is aging. We're having to put more money in it annually. And we did talk about, we have a plan coming up to replace that in the next year or two. We'll go to inside the plant, G8130. Compensation dipped slightly. That is due to Denise retiring, only working part-time. Capital purchases. Look at that. And that is, that's going to be a snow pusher for the facility. Right now we struggle with moving all the snow that we have in a timely manner. Also includes some overhead cranes. Our cranes are throughout our plant, and our really all of our pump stations are obsolete. We looked at these. This came into play actually with our Clem Road pump station. It failed. They can't get parts for them anymore. So we're going to start in a methodical fashion to replace these. We're hoping to use someone locally, a local manufacturer for those. Skipping down, our sludge hauling, always a big topic. Actually, before that, we'll see sodium hypochlorite, polymer, and ferric chloride. These are chemicals used in the treatment process. All of those have jumped tremendously, and we're hoping to get a better handle on those. Hopefully, the supply chain sort of levels out. Sludge hauling is pretty well flat at this point. Going down to our lab supplies and fees. You see that increased, and that is due to the replacement of old and outdated equipment in our lab, scale, a drying oven, and some supplies. These items have to be calibrated on a regular basis, and they're getting to the point that even our technicians are telling us that they can't be calibrated much longer. Building and ground maintenance. That is $10,000 worth of tree work and our rental trailer that we use to house part of our staff for breaks and lunch. Heading to the next page. Head down to a shoe allowance and rain gear. So this is a line item that is sort of titled inappropriately, but within there you'll see a big increase of almost $9,000. What is in there is $9,000 of Cdl training. The federal government has put a new mandate out regarding some training that is needed by every individual to obtain a Cdl. It is probably about a 2-inch binder that is not very clearly written. We're working with Highway to decipher this, but in the event that we cannot decipher this or we can't handle this in-house, that those dollars are allocated to send our guys to training. We'll skip down, Paul, to lab analysis. From 11,000 to 31,260. The biggest jump in there is we've allocated 20 weeks of testing while the plant is under construction. Our lab would be under construction. It is a Monroe County dedicated lab, so we've put dollars in there to send our testing out for 20 weeks. $17,000 approximately would be town expense. $5,000 would be village because we do complete village testing. That $5,000 of the village cost would be reimbursed by the village. Utilities are what they are. They're increasing. Electric and gas have increased, or will be increasing.
They've been going up quite a bit this year, so we had to reflect it in the budget.
Do you want to touch on any benefits, Paul?
On transfer of other funds?
Social Security, anything like that?
Yeah, every year I do an analysis of the employee benefits. I get information, projections from the New York State retirement system, and we do our best to guesstimate the number. Social Security is just a function of the salaries that are budgeted, 7.65%. Workers' comp, that's PERMA. I think we've had a little extra budgeted in that line, so I actually brought that down a little bit. Hospitalizations driven by the number of employees and the policies that they have. We're actually expecting a large increase year to year. We think it's going to be in the range of 15%. So that had to be built in. HRA and HSA admin, that's amounts that we pay to the employees. If they're on high deductible, they get an HSA funding from the town. $80,000 for retirees benefits, hospitalization benefits. Those are for retirees who qualify for health insurance upon retirement. And then just dental insurance and cash option payments for the employees that opt out of the health insurance. And we just have the revenue for O&M, which are driven largely by the, they're derived by the actual rate. The actual rate now is at 175.85. That's preliminary, but that's basically what drives most of these numbers. All right, you can talk about septic waste and why that's zero when it was 50,000 in this current year.
Absolutely. Septic waste is at zero. We do not have the ability to receive septic waste at this point because of the aeration. The treatment process just can't handle that intake of septic at this time. The aeration system is woefully inadequate, and for us to meet permit, to try to meet permit, we have to turn it away at this point.
The sale of equipment, I think that has to do with the vehicles that are going to be sold in
That is
conjunction
correct.
with enterprise fleet management,
That is
the
correct.
leasing of vehicles.
Yes.
So we're going to lease vehicles and we're going to sell some of the existing vehicles. And interest earnings is up substantially because interest rates are on their way up. So we were able to bump that budget line significantly.
So,
And capital side of things.
yeah. We'll do capital improvements pump stations. This has a few items in it. As our collection system is aging, as everyone's in the country is aging, we are trying to get ahead of failures on the 20 and 30-year-old stations that we have. A few items in here, new pumps at one of the stations. We'll be installing panels at two of the stations, new control panels. Be installing 2 new generators, standby generators at 2 of our stations. We do have funds in there to correct the inadequacies at our Glen Edith pump station that we just took over. Also, we'll be starting the process of replacing the rail systems in our submersible stations. The rails are what the pumps ride on. The rails that are in our pump stations are, again, I hate to use the word, but they're obsolete. We're actually having parts made at a machine shop for us at this point to keep them going. So it's the start of starting to replace those rails and mechanisms. So again, we'll just work through the station, and we have a plan for those. We don't need to do them all at once, but we need to start somewhere.
The next section is debt service. We have serial bond principal and interest payments on existing serial bonds that will mature between 2024 and 2049. There's currently no band principal or interest budgeted for the Phase 2 wastewater treatment plant project. We anticipate borrowing for that in January of 2023, which means the first interest payment wouldn't be due until January of 2024, so that excludes it from this budget. We did, however, include a $550,000 transfer to the sewer capital reserve. The sewer does have a capital reserve set up. It has about a $1.7 million in it, and that's used for a lot of the projects that seem to pop up. Some of them are unanticipated. It allows us to pay for those without borrowing. So we felt it was a good move to try to fund that capital reserve significantly in 2023.
We've got our revenue on capital fund. You see increases from commercial sewer rents, Xerox rentals, and Penfield rentals. And this is driven mainly by the proposed increase of the rates.
Yeah, the capital rate as of right now is 66.56. Once again, that's preliminary, but that's what has driven these revenues up because they're calculated with that rate. That's a derived rate. And this Monroe County debt reimbursement, that has to do with sandbar sewer lines that were installed many years ago. It was a joint county-town project, and as part of that, the county reimburses us for those debt payments. It matures in 2024. I think that's most of it.
I think that's it.
Is it question time yet?
I think it is it not?
What's that?
Question time.
Question time.
All right.
Absolutely.
So in capital improvements for pump stations, I know earlier in your budget, you were talking about cranes. So I just had a question. Do you include any of the costs of the new cranes in your capital improvements for pump stations on page 20?
No, so I'm targeting 2 cranes at the treatment plant first.
Okay. All right,
Again, we're looking at where the most need is.
yep. No,
Now, I can't, that being said, you know, between now and January 1st, we might not shift one of those needs to one of the pump stations.
right,
But as of right now, I'm targeting at least 2.
gotcha. How old is our flush truck?
Flusher is I think it's about 11 years old.
What's the life expectancy on one of those?
You know, I think it depends how much money you want to put into it, like anything else. We're getting into some bigger, last year I think we had $10,000 or $15,000 of repairs on, you know, items that they're having trouble finding, which is tough to believe.
Right,
Honestly, it is. So I wanted to put some extra money in there for those repairs, and you know, again, just sort of planning ahead that we might be looking at one in the next 2 years.
and I know these flush trucks are extremely expensive, but
Yes, they are.
many people may not know that. What is the average cost of a flush truck?
So from the little bit of research I did, I think when we go to buy one, it'll be $500,000.
Yeah,
So in like used cars, you know, there's a market for those as well.
right.
So we should get some good value out of it.
What else did I have? Oh, so your foreman, when is your foreman retiring?
The end of the year.
Okay, do we have anyone in mind to replace him, or we be hiring from the outside or promoting from within?
I'm working with Brayton on that,
Okay.
the 2 different options there, and see
Right.
how the structure falls out. Looking
Okay.
within if we can, if not, we'll look outside, but we'll, you know, want to get the right fit.
All right, that's all I had, thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Jenny?
Oh,
No, I say thanks, Art. for
I
the
forgot one
presentation.
question.
Shoot away.
Go ahead.
So in sewer operation and maintenance, the shoe allowance and rain gear went
Yes.
from 5,000 to 14,000. Understand your explanation. I just needed a little clarity on that. So the federal government has mandated new CDL training, correct?
They have.
Is that for all CDLs that our employees currently have, or are we going to send employees that don't have CDLs currently to get their CDL?
It is for employees or any CDL driver that wants to obtain that license. So current CDL holders do not need to go through this training. It's
Okay.
anyone wishing to obtain a CDL.
So how many employees do you have that in your department that need CDLs that don't have them?
Right now, I can identify 2,
Okay,
and I can see a 3rd one coming.
okay. That's definitely my last question, sorry.
It's okay, that's
Yeah,
okay.
keep going.
Yeah, we have a limited small pool, obviously, of staff. Everyone there really needs to have a CDL for us to function properly. And this
So-
is, honestly, John, this is, I'm hoping Denise is working with Highway to try to sort through this.
Right.
And hopefully we can just get it done in-house.
So say, for example, you're going to hire a new employee. Is it your policy that they have to come with a CDL?
It is not.
Okay.
If we can complete that training in-house and we can sort through it, we won't need to spend those costs, which would be great.
Okay,
And it's not time away from work also.
right. Thank you very much. I'm done now.
No, honestly, and Patty, I don't want to short you if you have questions.
I do not have questions because I've worked with Art with this budget previously.
And there it is for, you know, anybody watching this or attending live or watching a tape, is that, you know, each of the board members is liaison to 1 or 2 or 3 of the town departments. Patty is the department liaison to sewer. So within this budget process, a lot of these meetings, it's Patty, myself, Paul, and Art, wouldn't you say? That's why when Art presents, Patty and I aren't going to have many questions. We've been at the table. But I do applaud you, John, because you are not the liaison to sewer, and you had some great questions.
Thank you.
Well, there you go.
And
All right.
to your point, Councilman Cahill, as Highway Superintendent Stevens just walked in, he's been knee-deep in the CDL training. He can probably enlighten you more on that when he comes up later.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take some notes there, Pat. I'll be riddling the questions right at you.
Well,
No, it'd be great to get more information.
all right, you know what's great is we're still ahead of schedule when we get you out of the hot seat. But for all those, next Thursday, is it, the workshop? We have our friends from Navitas in.
Correct.
Yeah. Sewer's the thing in this town right now, right?
It's a thing. It's a thing.
You could probably
A lot
present
of upgrades.
for 4 hours, couldn't you, Art, if you were, yeah,
We absolutely could.
yeah. Thanks, Art.
Thank you, Art.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Art.
Well, geez, Adam, is that a tough act to follow? Adam Traub, our new, well, can we still call him new? 7.5 months in, library director?
Well, you were calling yourself new for the first 2 years. so
Well,
say,
yes,
yeah,
I mean, you know, but he seems to have a handle on his job a lot more than I had on my job after 7 months, so. Have at it, Adam.
Alrighty. So the first 3 lines that we have here are our personnel salaries. As a note, I put in a guesstimate as what 2023 might be for department heads, but that is really up to you all. So I put a guesstimate in there for my board when the time comes. You see the average or kind of year-over-year 2% increase for most of these lines, with the exception of hourly personnel. We had a key retirement this year, and we will bring in a new person to fill that position, not at the rate of the experienced person who was in that position. Going down, there's a line here, 20,000 equipment purchases, which we did not use or haven't used in the past. That is to replace our security keypad to our staff entrance after a security audit that Chief Kohlmeyer did with us, kind of following the tragic events in Buffalo. Going down, most of this is the same. You'll notice a small increase in the copier lease line. That's 48,100. We're replacing our copier with one that can both do black and white and color, and one where we will own the cash machine. Many vendors are no longer making these machines that take coins or dollar bills. And so the increase there will be offset by the revenue, we hope. Going down, another big change that you all may see is in 40,329 and 40,330. After the board workshop where I presented some of the challenges that the library is facing in consultation with Paul, we separated out the rent and the common area charges and taxes to kind of highlight those particular challenges. So the figure there represents the increase that we expect, but we wanted to separate them out so that we all have a better way of tracking them year over year, especially those common area charges and taxes.
Yeah, it appears as though the common area charges, camp charges, were underestimated for the 2022 budget. During the pandemic, the shutdown, those costs dropped.
Yeah,
I think we got a credit in 2021, which kind of threw us off for the 22 budget.
I think
that's what
that's
happened.
fair. Yeah, there was deferred maintenance. We received a credit in 2021 after some of that deferred maintenance. And there seemed to be some cyclical, as I looked over the CAM charges over the past 10 or so years, there are some cyclical maintenance charges, but then the deferred maintenance during the pandemic, I think, threw the estimate off. We, I think, have a pretty good handle on what we expect. It ended up being about a 3.7% increase between 2019 and 2021, if you take out 2020 as an outlier. Moving down, our cost share to the Monroe County Library System remains flat for the second year in a row. The following line, $40,530, library materials, or the stuff that goes in the library. This is trying to address that gap that I identified in the workshop in May. It will not fully address that gap, but I see this as a slow march towards addressing that gap. The next line down, library databases, there's a small increase here to address subscription fees that are rising. The rest are flat. Going down to natural gas, this increase was in consultation with Paul to try and address the rising increase of natural gas charges. Electric, it is my optimistic hope that this number drops after the LED lighting, but we can't bet on that because of rising energy charges. So we see a small increase there. So the total, moving down to benefits, I'm sorry. This was, Paul, anything that we should address specifically here?
Yeah. Well, once again, I calculated the retirement based on projections provided by New York State. Social Security is 7.65% of the budgeted wages. Hospitalizations driven by the number of employees and what policies they have. And any retirees that have hospital insurance as well. So we do a comparison of prior year actuals and budgets to try to estimate where we should be at. Revenues?
Thank you. Moving down to revenues, you'll notice a decrease in book fines. This both reflects the nationwide trend of decreasing book fine revenue, as well as the board's decision to drop fines for juvenile and young adult material. The next line, you'll see an increase. This is an increase both reflecting our increased foot traffic year over year since the pandemic, as well as my hope that people will take fuller advantage of this easier to use and higher quality copier machine that we're replacing. Moving down, there's a large increase on our interest. And then the state aid here, I will make a note. This will be updated before October, but I'm not one to count my chickens before they're hatched. We did receive a small increase in state aid this year, and I did receive that final notice this week. So that will be adjusted up with a slight increase in revenue there. And moving down, the other large change that you may note is a $0 appropriation of the fund balance in an attempt to grow that with the view that in 9 years we will likely have to use heavily of that fund balance for whatever solution we look to for housing the library once the lease ends.
And the library is funded by general fund. It's not funded by raising property taxes. So the amount currently budgeted to be transferred is to $2,348,196, which is up about 5% year to year.
Although I'll note that the total appropriations year over year is about 2.6%.
Yep. Correct.
All right.
Thank you, Adam. It's very nice present, and I know that the library is, important for our community, and there are things in there that you have tried to, make it so that we don't have to go about, tax cap. So I really appreciate that very much.
Thank you.
I have one small, probably minor question.
Yeah.
Really not pertaining to your budget. You mentioned LED lighting. Is that something that you recently switched over to in the library?
We've slowly switched over to, so the construction funds that we used to replace the HVAC came in under budget. And so to maximize our match from New York State, we replaced a bunch of older non-LEDs with that. So we're kind of trying to do it zone by zone throughout the library. So we're not fully LED at this point.
Okay, great. I mentioned that because that was one of the 100 list in the 150 of climate smart communities of when we were debating that, we talked about things that we're already doing. So in this instance, we're already doing that. We could
Absolutely.
check off that box had we chosen to go in that direction.
Yeah, thank you.
And Paul, I know it was you said 2,000 something, I think you meant 2,000,000, 348,196 is what, if this stays true, would be transferred from the general fund over to library, correct?
Correct.
And unlike all the other departments we do, all of these line items that Adam just went over, because they're libraries under state education law, we at the town government, finance director, you don't have to keep per se track of each of those line items to stay that's an appropriation line item, or what is it called, that you can't go over once you set the budget. Adam and the library board has a lot of flexibility per se with if the town transfers over $2,348,000. Okay. If Adam and the library board, and I think, Adam, you've started a pretty good relationship with Paul and asking for financial, advice on certain things. If Adam and the library board manage their business well, they get more revenues than they anticipated. They get less cost and manage those less. If their year end is better than the budget, than the $2,348,000 in this case, let's say they do better by 100,000. Does that 100,000 go back to the town's general fund, or does it go to the library fund balance?
It's in the library fund balance.
Okay. And Adam said at the end that he is looking to manage that library fund balance over the years, because in 9 years, you're anticipating when the lease is over on the library that some of that, or whatever of the library fund balance, may be needed for the a new different facility, which is logical. Paul, what is the fund balance of the library history in the last 3 or 4 years?
I think it finished 2021 with about 430-some thousand. It actually has grown significantly over the past 2 or 3 years. Actually, during the pandemic, they actually saved quite a bit on compensation, employee compensation versus the budget. It's like 3 years ago, I think the fund balance was only around 170.
I think, John, when you
even
took
be less.
over as liaison, it was in the 100-some-odd range. I remember early on in 20. So it's really
grown.
both through good management and just kind of serendipitous luck, I'll call it. I hate to say it, one of the few good things about COVID. The fund balance for the library is in the $400,000 range. And I took you down this primrose path of questioning because Adam and I have started discussions, and actually I've now met with the president, chair of the foundation, the Library Foundation Board, and I'm seeking in the next couple of weeks to meet with the president or chair of the Friends of Webster Library. Simply said, when Adam presented to the board in May, and he affectionately called it the stuff, the materials that they go out and buy for the library, books, audio books, digital books, all that stuff. Adam showed that historically, the Webster Library, for a socioeconomic community that we are in population, is investing about half what other like-sized libraries do on materials. So I want to partner up with the library leadership and board and also that foundation and the Friends or whatever they're called.
Yeah, the Friends.
There's more cooks in the kitchen than I know what to do with. To see if there's something that can be done collaboratively to address that faster. I know you said here you're increasing your line item here from 102,000 to 110,000. But you could even just within managing your budget well this year in '23, increase that line item in '23 to 150,000 if you somehow cut another 50,000 throughout the year of '23. Did I confuse the issue?
No, potentially, that's an option, yeah.
Okay. So that's what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
And I have one more meeting to have. I don't even know who the leadership is of the Friends of, you don't have to say that.
I can take care of that.
But once that meeting is had, if it follows the other ones that I've had, that they're like, yeah, I'd be interested in having that conversation, well, then I think we can get the 4 entities, I think it's 4, library board, library director, foundation of the library, friends of the library, and the town, actually that's 5, which the town would be represented, Ginny, by you and I. And potentially Paul too, because it's a financial thing.
That's right.
And see if we can come up with something. Stick around. Thanks, Adam.
Stay tuned.
Yeah. Any other questions?
No, thank
No?
you, Adam.
Okay.
Thanks, Adam.
Adam, is this your first budget presentation
To this board.
to this board?
Yeah.
Good job.
I agree.
And where did oh, here we go. So, okay. Now, we have it as community development first and engineering second. Is that the way you're gonna go, or Mary, do you wanna go first?
Our budgets are so intertwined that there's different funds that either of us are going to speak to.
Okay,
So
cool.
we'll take turns.
Sounds good.
So I'll go through the first one, building maintenance. The first line item, it shows that there was no expense allocated in this year for it. I'm proposing $10,000 for next year. Last year in 2021, we spent about $8,500 coordinating with Highway on the front sidewalk modification. There used to be a big puddle out in front of Town Hall whenever it rained, repaving the front parking lot and striping it. They put in a sidewalk for us and some other miscellaneous site improvements, and I'd like to continue doing that year to year, just picking away at some improvements around Town Hall, excuse me, Town Hall and the courthouse. Capital improvements and maintenance have remained the same. Capital improvements is for unforeseen single purchases. An example is replacing the door down by the exterior door down by the police officer's entrance this year, and pumps and things that fail. The maintenance line is more for routine things like pest control, HVAC, the maintenance contract. The town building cleaning service, we are proposing to budget a little bit higher for next year in anticipation of potentially needing to rebid it depending on how the contract goes this year. Refuse and telephone has remained the same. We're proposing to increase natural gas and electric just based on this year's expenses. We've just about hit or exceeded what was budgeted for natural gas already, and we're about halfway through. And then slight increase in water. So that is building maintenance. Are there any questions on that area of the budget?
No.
Ian,
Going fire marshal?
I don't
can I ask one?
Sure.
I think we're gonna have to take a look at the HVAC situation at Town Hall eventually. John, I heard you chuckle. Because I think we have about a dozen residential units.
Yes, it's definitely not a cohesive system that's in place at Town Hall right now. There's a lot of small units that aren't meant to operate in such a size building. So it would be a great project to overhaul the HVAC and get something that's properly sized for the building.
John was chuckling and I was shaking my head yes.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's something that wasn't touched in the renovation, to my understanding, was the HVAC system.
Thank you.
Okay, so in terms of the fire marshal's office, the first line item is for overtime. Those are generally call-outs for evening and weekend emergencies in which the fire marshal's office must respond. So we're keeping that flat year over year. The next line item is the fire marshal's salary, which is, I believe, dictated by the union contracts. Below that is the part-time assistant fire marshal. We are proposing a slight increase for that position to account for inflation and cost of living. That is a part-time role, so they are not covered under the collective bargaining agreement. Computer equipment and licensing, it was at 0 for the current year. We've since implemented tablets for inspection out in the field. So there are some software costs associated with that application. Likewise, cellular telephones has increased. In order for the field tablets to work, we needed to purchase data plans through our cell phone service provider. But I believe it's leading to a lot of efficiencies overall. And training and seminar, that's to cover their annual fire safety conference that they attend each year, which is required continuing education credits. We've kept their supply line flat year over year. The auto maintenance budget has been increased due to the 2 fire marshal vehicles. They will not be ones that are replaced through our fleet program this year, so we just want to be prepared in case there are any issues with those 2 vehicles. And fuel, we've increased due to current economic conditions.
B fund?
Are there any questions on that section of the budget?
I do, but I don't want to jump ahead of Patty or John or Jimmy. Is the revenue from that we are now doing in '22 reflected for fire marshals someplace else in this budget?
I believe it is reflected later on in the budget,
Okay.
not within this particular section.
Gotcha. All right. And I mean, I call that affectionately the John Cahill revenue, because Councilman Cahill, you were very instrumental in researching that with other towns and bringing that to Webster, which I think was smart. And I just want to make sure, and Paul, you might be the best to answer this, is the fire marshal in the white collar union or the blue collar union?
White collar.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know it doesn't seem like much, but correct me if I'm wrong, Paul. We right now have flat white collar and blue collar cost of living adjustments because we haven't negotiated the white and blue collar contracts for January 1st, 23.
That's right. 0% CPI right now.
Okay. So we will change that on the fire marshal line to flat to be consistent with every other white collar. I don't know if I can say.
That was a step increase. He got a step increase.
He got a step increase?
Yeah.
Okay, then that's what that is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Step increase
Sorry.
with 0% COLA.
Strike that from the record.
Yep.
And then the part-time fire marshal, how, non-union, part-time, how are the part-time, have we, in the other budgets, I think there has been a somewhat COLA increase to that in this budget, is that correct?
Some have, some haven't. It's, I would say it's inconsistent.
It's basically based on the
Usually
department.
goes along with the blue collar, white collar contract COLA. So
Okay,
I would say for the most part, there are not permanent part-time pay increases built in here, but there was on that particular line.
okay. And the only reason I bring it up is, I mean, this is kind of a microcosm of the whole, you'll notice that throughout this, all the department heads have no increase from 22 to 23. In this budget at this point, that was purposeful. We've talked with all the department heads. None of the town board members, none of the blue collar, white collar, because we don't have the contract. Really, the only slotted increase, COLA, is the police contract that we discussed last week, that they'll be going into their third and last year, and it's collective bargain agreed that it's, I think, 2.5%.
Yeah,
Right.
2.5.
Okay. So I just wanted to make sure that we weren't doing something outside of the overall philosophy of this budget for fire marshal and part-time fire marshal. And it doesn't sound like we are.
For the part-time, we did.
Okay. We'll move on.
Okay, so the Public Works Fund is what the next one's called. The first line, part-time employees, that number is associated with our part-time GIS staff member currently, and allocating some funds towards the intern program that we have done the last 2 summers, and they'll be presenting at next week's workshop on what they've done this summer for us. I think you'll be very impressed with what they've accomplished. There is a small line item for overtime that has remained the same since last year. Director of Community Development and Town Engineer. And then the full-time employees is inclusive of the Assistant Town Engineer. That was a position approved in the budget last year, and we filled it recently, and he just started on Monday. And then another employee who was formerly in charge of GIS and some other tasks for engineering has moved to the building department, so that's an open position that will be refilled in the upcoming months. And then we also had a retirement in my department, which is a construction inspector type position that will be filled in the upcoming months. And then there's also a clerk who is shared between community development and engineering. So that's the 4 positions that are in that line item. The next one is the new IT budget line item. So this includes licensing for the department as well as some computer replacements. The capital purchase has money set aside for some additional tablets because those have been a good asset to the employees that we've outfitted to date, and we'd like to get a few more. Some office furniture and starting to replace some filing cabinets around the office. The next few are pretty generic. Safety equipment, office supplies. The cleaning is the other half of the A fund that we just talked about. Cell phones for some of our staff. Some more just general office things. The BAS annual support system that we use, municipal dues and publications. The equipment lease is for the copier that's in our area of the office. The next line item is new. The vehicle operating lease expense is the enterprise line item. So the one here accounts for the Ford Ranger that we're getting, as well as 3 Escapes, and we're getting a 5th vehicle, but that's accounted for under the building department. Vehicle expense has gone way down since we only have 1 or 2 that won't be new. We put some money aside for conference expenses for continuing education for Josh and myself and other staff. We've kind of earmarked a stormwater floodplain conference that we'd like to attend next year. Internet is for the town hall campus. Fuel has gone up some. And then the engineering and surveying services are for any consultant services that we may need throughout the year. Uniforms to provide our staff with some polos and town gear to look professional. Our GIS professional services is a consultant. We currently use MRB to help us troubleshoot some of our more technical GIS questions. And then again, the utilities for the town hall campus of gas and electric. And then the one revenue line item in this area is the anticipated fees collected from inspection and engineering for the development that occurs in town. Are there any questions on this fund?
When are your vehicles scheduled to arrive?
I knew you'd ask that question. So all 5 have been scheduled for production. So I think we're another 2 or so months out, but they've at least all made it on the schedule to actually be made, and then it takes the time for them to be produced and ship and get outfitted. So
Okay.
I'm hoping by October we start seeing some show up at Town Hall.
It's been a long wait.
Sure has.
Okay, moving on to the building department. First line item we kept relatively flat at 1,000 for overtime. The second one is for the building inspector salary. Third one is the clerk that supports the building inspector and assistant building inspector. The assistant building inspector, you'll note that there's a pretty sizable increase from last year. That is due to the previous employee leaving that position after 6 months or so, and then we ended up promoting from within. So due to the union contracts, that essentially dictated where this employee sits on the pay scale. The next line item is representing what I'd like to do with our existing code enforcement officer title, which is currently vacant. I'm proposing to change that role slightly to a code compliance coordinator, with the thought of getting some additional assistance for helping with identifying problematic sections of our code and taking a more proactive approach to code enforcement in terms of identifying certain common complaints that we often receive in the office that our current code just simply doesn't have regulations that deal with certain things. So we're tweaking that title to add a little bit more responsibility. Our department had originally requested an additional full-time junior planner to help with the day-to-day operations in the office. So that was not really palatable at this point. So the alternative was to slightly expand the role of the code enforcement officer with an additional focus on helping to move forward some much needed code changes and revisions. So we do have a particular candidate in mind, and we will be entering into the negotiations with them. The next line has to do with the computer equipment and licensing. We will be replacing 1 or 2 of the desktop computers in the building department, one of which is at the permit counter. It is one of our older computers, and it doesn't always perform as it should when we're working with customers at the counter. So we will be replacing that. Professional services and town code compliance. Those are services that we occasionally need to procure to either secure sites after an incident, or professional serving of code enforcement notices. So we do typically have some money set aside for that, as well as problem properties that aren't mowing their lawn, or there isn't currently a homeowner. Occasionally we have to hire a service to cut lawns, and then we ultimately put that fee onto the property tax bill. Office supplies, we've increased by 300 to be more commensurate with how we're tracking this current budget year. The vehicle operating lease expense represents one of the new lease vehicles that we will be receiving. The dues and conferences are the annual training, the Finger Lakes Building Association training that the building staff goes to. It is an annual expense. It was omitted from last year's budget, which is why it's showing as an increase, but in reality, it is an annual expense. The fuel expense, we kept relatively flat. We will be getting a newer vehicle, and I guess the thought was it will most likely be a little more fuel efficient than the current one. And since we are getting that new vehicle, we've reduced the vehicle maintenance line down to 0. And we've also added a slight amount for uniforms, jackets, polos, etc. for our staff. So as you can see, we kept revenue from building permits relatively flat. I think that number, I think we're on track to exceed that number for the current fiscal year. But with the uncertainty in the economy and supply chain issues and material costs going up, we opted to keep the revenue flat in case there's a reduction in building activity next year. Would there be any questions on this part of the budget?
Yes. So your code enforcement compliance coordinator, I think that's a great addition. I know we've had discussions as to what his role would be. And you had mentioned that there's a lot of common code complaints that you receive. Could you just give us a couple examples of some of the common code complaints that you do receive?
One that we hear quite a lot of is parking on lawns, parking of vehicles on front lawns. Mm-hmm. Currently, our code does not have anything that prohibits that. Some other municipalities in Monroe County have very specific rules and regulations.
I know the village does.
Specific to where you can park vehicles.
Oh, yeah.
That's definitely a common one. The high grass and weeds, we already have something on the books for that, but that's obviously another common one. There's some ambiguity in terms of outdoor storage of materials.
Right.
There's some vague gray areas that we'd like to shore up so that we...
And that'd be great, because there are some yards that you would think are, yeah. I don't want to get too specific, but yeah.
We're looking to bolster our regulations to give us more teeth.
Right.
To be able to address these common issues that we hear very often.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's going to be it'll be very well found when he starts looking into these things, and then eventually bring it to the board so we can shore up these codes, because just the examples that you gave are much needed, in my opinion anyways. It makes his job easier too, to take the ambiguity away from the codes that he's trying to enforce. The more teeth it has, the better it is for everybody, including the homeowner, right?
Right. Yeah, whenever we can remove ambiguity out of the code, I think that's generally a positive thing.
Yeah, I think you're moving in a great direction. The other question I had was, where do you show your revenue from code violations?
I don't believe it's a separate line item. Believe it or not, we don't fine very often. I don't think we have a very significant revenue stream from code enforcement at this
Not
point.
even,
And
do we send our employees out for grass that is overgrown and then charge for cutting those lawns?
Yes, we procure a third-party service. We pay that service to perform the lawn cutting, and then ultimately that fee gets added to the property tax bill.
Well, that would be, okay, so you don't just, I got you.
So we ultimately recoup it. It is a upfront expense to the town, but
Right.
the thought is we do recoup it through the tax.
Okay.
Josh, the only question I had was the way you described the code enforcement compliance coordinator. I'm keeping my fingers crossed that you said we're about to enter into, an offer, negotiations. Does that mean we got good news from civil service today?
We did get very good news this afternoon that
Great.
they have approved the tweaking of that title for
That's
the town.
fantastic.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yes.
You made my night.
Good.
Good job.
Yep, so I will be sharing that news with the prospective candidate tomorrow, and then once Brayton gets back, we will enter
That's
into
great.
negotiations.
That's great.
Are there any other questions on that portion? Okay.
Thank you.
Moving along to the Zoning Board of Appeals. The first line item under this section is compensation for the board members, which I believe they received a slight increase earlier this year or late last year. We've opted to keep it flat for this year. The second line item is the recording secretary, who is essentially split between both the planning board and the zoning board. So that line item represents 50% of the salary of that position. We have an attorney to the board. That salary is reflected on the next line item. Occasionally, there's some additional support needed by the town attorney. So we've included some funds to account for that on some of the more complicated legal zoning matters. The office and mileage is to reimburse the board members for performing their site visits. So they submit receipts with their mileage, and then the town reimburses them for that expense. The signage is to cover the cost of our property under review signs for any applications that are going before the zoning board, and then legal expenses in case there are any special circumstances that require additional legal expenses. So as you could see, the revenue from the zoning fees is slightly reduced from the current year. That's in anticipation of less variance requests due to the updated fence and shed regulations that were recently passed. I thought there would be a substantial reduction in variance requests, and there are for sheds and fences, but there have been an interesting number of variance requests have continued on. So we've slightly adjusted the revenue from that aspect. And I'll just continue on, much like the zoning board, the planning board, there's compensation for the 7 members of that board. The recording secretary, again, that's the other 50% of the salary of that employee. There's another attorney to the planning board, so that's their salary line item. And then again, mileage reimbursements for when they do their site visits. We have seen a slight reduction in the amount of planning board applications, so we've reflected a slight reduction in our revenue from those fees.
Employee benefits are just based on history, as I explained previously, for the most part. So medical insurance is trending up, 15% increase expected for 2023.
And Paul, is that,
It actually decreased this line item because it had too much in it in the previous year.
those employee benefits, those 10 line items that add up to 315,000, that's for the whole engineering and community development and planning board and,
Correct.
okay.
Yeah. And in the revenue category, the largest revenue is $384,000 for sales tax. We actually changed the allocation. It gets split between the general part-time fund and the highway part-time fund. We shifted so that most of the sales tax is now being credited to the highway part-time fund. And that's in an effort to bring down fund balance within the general part-time fund, or B fund. The town has a fund balance policy. The B fund was significantly over that, as was the highway fund. But we're trying to get the B fund fund balance down within the acceptable range as outlined by the fund balance policy. So if you can see down below, we've actually appropriated $400,000 of fund balance for the 2023 budget. So that's our effort to reduce the fund balance, unreserved fund balance within this fund, which is the reason we decreased the sales tax allocation. Sales tax has been historically high for 2021, 2022 is trending the same way. I wouldn't expect that to continue, but that's where it's at right now. Although inflation obviously would drive it up because prices go up, so does the sales tax.
Since we can never actually put a finger on what that's going to be, lately it's
No.
been a nice surprise.
Right.
Are we still part of the healthcare consortium?
We sure are. And that's why when you heard 15%, it was disappointing to hear. We don't, FLMHIT, is it, whatever that acronym stands for.
The Finger Lakes
Finger Lakes
Consortium.
Health. They haven't come out yet and said exactly what the increase is. They just said prepare for 15%. Is that correct, Paul?
Yes, they've seen as high as 19% in some other communities that have negotiated new contracts.
Yeah.
So the health insurance provided by the consortium is being bid. They won't have the results until the end of September or so.
Yeah.
But they have seen as high as 19%. Basically, there's just 2 players that would be qualified to bid, Excelis and MVP.
Yeah.
So we're with MVP right now. We'll see what happens.
Let's hope they sharpen the pencil when it comes to the
Yep.
bidding process.
I hope so too. I only have one question if the presentation is done. And I hate to beat a horse dead, but, so where was the revenue from Fire Marshal?
I don't think the revenue from Fire Marshal is built into this budget. I just made a note to check on that. That's something we can probably add in.
Okay.
I think it would end up actually in general fund.
Yeah, and I'd like to know year-to-date, since 2022
Yeah.
was the
Right.
first year it went into effect, I think, John?
Yes.
How that,
Yeah, I mean, I have to check on it. Do you have a feel for how it's trending, or is there actual, anything significant coming in?
Well, I know that we
I'd have to look.
implemented it originally in March. I don't have the exact amounts
Okay.
of revenue we've collected to date, but I could certainly get that information.
Yeah, how would you track that?
Well,
Just out of
it-
curiosity.
The fire marshal's office works with our clerk, and our clerk facilitates it with finance. We do send out invoicing, and it is coordinated with our finance department.
So it is trackable then?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'd be very interested in knowing what that number is.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll check it out.
It's like the lawn cutting, same thing.
John, I applaud you for having done all the research with all the other towns and bringing the concept to the table. So we got it done, and I am interested in how it's going.
No, I absolutely agree.
Yeah, I'm
Thank
with you.
Okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
okay.
beautiful.
I think that might be it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh and Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you, Josh and Mary.
Hey, Tom,
Yes, sir.
did you order pizza yet?
Do I look like an amateur? There's food coming.
All
Do
right.
you think I'm kidding?
Yeah,
think I'm kidding?
I do.
You,
I will be pleasantly surprised if food arrives.
it will.
Okay.
Honestly.
You'll get a real attaboy from me.
Okay, well, that's all I live for is, an attaboy. I'm sure you won't like what it is, but, well, luckily, we're still 8 minutes ahead of schedule because Pat Stevens, our highway superintendent, is about to present what I think, Paul, is the business within the town government business, if you want to call it, of highway, the largest subset of the town.
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. So Pat is
big
running the largest organization, both dollars and potentially staff too, right? Well, Chris, with part-time, you probably are more. It counts. But
It counts.
of course it counts. Pat, have at it.
Perfect, thank you. So I'll just run down through this. As Tom said, there's a lot of lines here. I'm going to try to focus on the ones that have changes so we can understand the difference between last year and this year primarily. As I'm going, if there's any specific questions or things I missed, please, board, chime in and ask me to explain a line. I'm more than happy to touch on any of them. So as we start down through here in the top in the townwide fund, you'll see salaries for myself. And then there's compensation for employees, which includes the admin staff at the office. The increase you see there is grade changes, so they're merit-based increases based on the current contract. As we touched on a little bit earlier, we are in a contract year, so those COLA increases are flat currently, so you'll see various different lines in here, labor lines or employee compensation lines that are slightly increased. We did factor in what we felt for merit increases were going to happen in 2023 for the current contract. That's what's carried in there.
Step increases only.
Correct. Yep. Head a little bit farther down, you'll see the $5,000 increase for computer equipment and licensing. That's due to the restructuring of how IT is operating, putting the budgetary values for each department within their budget instead of separately in an IT budget. So next year we put in $5,000 for that, for computers and software and things of that nature. A little bit farther down, you'll actually see a decrease in security system monitoring from 21,000 down to 7,500. That was because there's a large upgrade needed this year that we didn't have any choice in at the highway facility for the security. There had to be a 5G receiver put in, so this current budget has $13,000. That is that specific upgrade. That's not an upgrade that's needed every year, so we're back down to a normal operating budget for our security system of $7,500 in 2023. Down through the rest of it, things are generally flat, pretty the same from year to year. You get down into utilities, and there's some increases in there, and those are just based on the rates we've seen in the last year, basically. Some of those numbers have gone up pretty significantly. That's a little bit twofold. The rates literally have gone up from these utility companies. And then secondly, we're not currently operating in the most efficient building down there. So when rate increases go up, they affect us more greatly because the building is 50 years old and isn't efficient. So it actually compounds that number because of the lack of efficiency in addition to the rate increases going up. So if you were to take a efficient newer building, those increases would be less with the rate because the quantity consumption isn't there. So that's why those have jumped up pretty significantly.
Yeah, inside and the outside.
Yeah, especially when we go out to plow. Literally all the heat leaves and has to get refilled. So hopefully we'll fix that in the near future, but we'll see. So those are the main sections of that fund. Can hop over to the townwide highway fund. Paul.
Well, you want to go to C? Any comments on street lighting, intersection lighting?
Oh, sorry, did I skip all that? I don't think there was many changes in there.
No.
So the street lighting was very similar. Some small increases. We saw an increased cost in some of our lighting districts. There are very few in town, and we do hire that out because it's mostly electrical. But we did see some increases, so wanted to carry a little money in there. I also, these are interesting small little districts. Most of the lights in town are managed by RG&E. I would also like to at some point look into the districts that we do have and see what it would take to upgrade them with efficiencies, LED programs, different stuff like that. There might be good grant funding and different things for. And then potentially, depending on how it goes, see if RG&E would be willing to take them over to a certain extent. A lot of them are so small that, and we do so little of it, that we're not able to really efficiently manage lighting districts. We don't have our own staff that handles anything with the lights. So if we could upgrade those systems to be current and efficient and possibly get them to be taken over by a utility, like 90% of them are in town, that would be, it's kind of my ultimate goal with lighting at this time. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Jump to highway townwide?
Sure, sorry, I got a little ahead there. Yeah, highway townwide, you'll see there near the top, there's another employee compensation section that primarily, the increase there, is to represent the merit and step increases within the current contract. Again, there is some sections down through here where there are going to be additional expenses for additional employees. That we have several different labor lines within these different funds that work certain ways. So when I add an employee, it's not seen in one chunk in one place. It affects several different lines, which we have labor lines for leaves, for snow removal, for regular road work, for maintenance, all that type of stuff. So just to hit that quickly, we currently have a budget for 40 employees at the highway department. The plan for next year is to go to 42 employees, making our way toward the direction where I feel we need to be based on the mileage of roads that we currently have and the number of people in town that we service. Right now we're on the longer side. This really comes into play with our winter operations, with our snow and ice removal. We've seen the amount of time it takes to plow the entire town increase slightly over the years. So the biggest factor in that is as miles of road get added, if we don't add employees and trucks to get with them, each truck has to go farther, which takes longer. So you start to see these times creep up. And it's one of the major things in a huge storm. Right now we're between 4 and 6 hours. In a large storm, it would take us about 6 hours to clear the entire town. That includes county, state, and local roads. In a big storm where it's snowing an inch an hour, if it takes 6 hours from when I start at this house to when I finish the route and come back around, that first house has 6 inches of snow and the last house on the route doesn't. And we can get as much as 2 inches an hour. So that first house could have a foot of snow when the other house on the other section of town just got plowed. And that causes people to feel like we haven't ever even been there at times. So we really need to get that brought back down closer to the 4-hour range maximum, and that's gonna obviously just limit those numbers and get things back to a better service level than we currently can achieve right now. Now, the guys do a great job. They often do it a lot faster than that. We do a lot of preventative work to make sure there aren't issues, but they can only go so fast out there on the road with the plows. So that's the reason for the increase of employees this year from 40 to 42. That's nothing to do with that specific line, but like I said, it's kind of hard to see all the places the labor pops up. As we go down through a little bit farther, we get to the equipment purchases line. That's always kind of one of our biggest lines. The equipment we use for all of our activities, whether it's summer maintenance or winter snow removal, is very, very expensive. And I'm continuing to make the push toward having newer equipment that is turned over more quickly with less hours on it in order to capitalize on the resale and overall drive the equipment cost down over time. So we're starting to see a little bit in this trend that we'll touch on later in the revenue section of this, but we are starting to see that the revenue we're generating from the resale of equipment that we're using starting to creep up and go up. As that happens, the delta between the purchase of new equipment and what we're reselling it for will get smaller, and that's going to drive the overall cost to the taxpayers down. It also increases our ability to serve. So with less breakdowns and less older equipment, we don't have to worry about loss in service due to equipment. So in this, yeah, Paul just tapped on it there a little bit farther down. We've increased the annual maintenance by $30,000. Labor and maintenance we have to send out is through the roof. Parts are more and more expensive with the Tier 4 efficient diesel systems that are out there. So our equipment is still old enough and needing enough repairs that equipment part is going up. If we can get everything to be newer, say less than 4,000 hours or close to it, at least on our heavy use items, you're going to see that number drop significantly, over $100,000 in time, because newer equipment that doesn't have as many hours, doesn't take as much maintenance, doesn't have as many breakdowns, and if they are, they'd be under warranty. A lot of the equipment we're purchasing now, we are purchasing between 3 and 5 years of warranty on it. So if we can stay within that frame, it really freezes and stabilizes what we're going to have in those maintenance costs over that time period.
That's a big number.
Could save labor too, if we're doing a lot of the repairs.
Yeah, yeah,
They
I
can,
mean,
devote that time to something more productive.
yeah, when we get into heavy time like this year, I think there's been a sweeper, street sweeper in our shop almost every day in the last few weeks. We got done chip seal, so they're out, all 3 of them are out full time. They have breakdowns, they have issues. One of them's 20 years old. So we're working on that. We're actually working on that very soon on a new sweeper. So, but that's just the general equipment section. So this year we are slightly higher. We were able to do that because of some additional revenue lines and different things that'll come up a little bit later. We'll explain that a little bit more, which balanced out the fund overall for our lines. But going down through the rest of that section, major changes, you'll see the vehicle operating lease expense line. That is the enterprise leasing program. We currently have the Foreman's trucks in that section. So next year we anticipate, in order to switch out those trucks on a 5-year rotation, the lease expenses will be about $50,000. We're hoping to order those trucks this fall. We have not been able to order the Super Duty, the heavy duty trucks, so we can put the plows on them yet this year. They're saying there might be a window in October, maybe November. The Chevy window that opened for orders this year was 1 day, and they filled the orders and they stopped. So I'm not sure what the Fords we're looking at to match our current fleet will end up like. If we get them ordered in October and November, we may see them by next October or November. So that's currently the feedback from Enterprise on our pickup trucks. A lot of the equipment purchases that are in that $980,000 are in the same bracket. I got a quote for a lowboy trailer earlier this year, and it was a 45-month lead time. Yeah.
45 months.
Yeah.
How do
It was just
they stay in business?
I don't know.
incredible. So some of this stuff is getting out of control. Our large trucks, the big 10-wheel dump trucks, they're a little over a year. I would say 18 months. We're trying to get into a program now where we're bringing in agreements or intents to purchase that have some language in them about being contingent on a budget being passed, so that we can get something on their books, almost a place in line, so to speak, so that when the budget for the next year does pass, we're already in line and we don't have to start back behind 20 other people that have purchased. So there's a few of those things I'm trying to be creative with, and you may see in here to discuss coming up. But that's, the equipment section is challenging, both in dollars and in now just taking the equipment. Even once you get the funds and we establish the budget, it takes a very long time to actually get the equipment in the door. And during that time, I've seen, at least on a couple pieces already, we have accrued quite a lot of cost on some of the older pieces that we're keeping during that time. So really hoping to find a way to shorten that window. As you move down through, we touched on equipment repair and maintenance. That's up slightly, mostly due to labor and just still having some equipment that continues to need quite a lot of annual expense. We aren't able to knock that down yet. We're not quite at that point with changing out our equipment. So moving down from there, we go into the revenue section. I mentioned there's a couple of significant things here. Most all of it is the same until you get down to rental equipment for government, Monroe County, and then there is a new line a little bit below that that is rental equipment for Monroe County projects. That is a result of the IMA that we signed earlier this year with Monroe County Parks. Monroe County Parks is putting a significant investment into several of their parks. And a lot of that work is in the form of roadway and parking lot upgrades. This year, that line right there is actually going to top out at $176,000 worth of additional revenue on this year's budget. So next year, let me preface this, we did a lot of work for them this year, more than I had anticipated coming into it, probably stretched our limits a little bit on it to do the 176. So next year, my plan going into it would not be to do quite as much. So we put that line in at 100,000. And obviously, having that brand new revenue line that we feel is going to be there next year helps this fund in general when it comes to the equipment expenses and all that type of things. On the equipment rental, other governments, Monroe County, that's our typical DOT work, which we have always had a IMA for. That has been tracking last year and this year higher than we budgeted, so I increased that revenue line by $25,000. Sale of equipment, that's the line that I mentioned is starting to creep up. Years past, that's been $20,000, $40,000. That's because of a lot of the equipment that we're either sending to auction or trading in is significantly, it's older. It's got a lot of hours. Now we're starting to get a few pieces mixed in there that are only 3 or 4 years old, under 3,000 hours. The price goes up significantly. This year on that line, we estimated $110,000. We had one trade-in piece that we used that was less than 4,000 hours. It came in at $90,000 on its own. Just one out of the 5 pieces we're planning to sell. So significantly higher than we budgeted, hoping to see that trend continue to help balance out this section out and allow us to keep high efficiency, low breakdown time, I guess, equipment running on the roads. The next significant one is the CHIPS funding. That's the funding that we get from the state annually. We are, as costs continue to increase, we adjust how we use that money a little bit. This year, we increased that line by $100,000, again, to help offset equipment costs and continue our program there to improve and get on a better track as far as resale and overall expense. So I think that was the last big change, and then there's the totals at the bottom there. The next section, Paul, is debt services. I don't know if you want to.
Serial bond. Well, I can talk about the transfer.
Yeah, that's.
The Highway Part-Town Fund uses the equipment, which is owned by the Highway Townwide Fund, to do permanent road repairs, snow removal, leaf pickup, etc. So there's actually a charge between the two funds of $500,000 is transferred from the Highway Part-Town Fund to the Highway Townwide Fund to compensate this fund for the use of that equipment, since the equipment is purchased within this fund. Syria bonds, pretty flat year to year. These will mature in about 4 years or 5 years from now. And then we have employee benefits again, which are fairly flat year to year. I think there was some extra budgeted in here in 2022, so we're trying to bring that closer to reality. And then you come down to the amount raised by taxes, which is down about 100,000 year to year. When it's all said and done. Those revenues are up significantly. Go to the highway part-time?
Yeah, yep.
Highway part-time.
So highway part-town, there's a lot of different sections in here. The first section you'll see is another employee compensation section for the work that's done under this fund. That is up slightly, again, step increases, and then the result of the 2 additional employees, there's a portion of that in there also, but not too significant across the whole expanse. Then right after that, there's fuel. We put an additional $20,000 in for fuel. I believe that will be enough, only because I think we increased by $20,000 or $40,000 last year. So there has been a huge jump, but we did start to take a bite out of it last year. We're going to take another bite this year. It's very hard to tell exactly how that's going to track or which direction it's going to go, but we did increase it slightly. We think that will be a reasonable amount to carry us through 2023. I hope we keep getting more feedback on that every month, but right now it seems like it will be appropriate. If you go down into the next section, there's compensation for capital improvements, some of our highway stuff. A few of these sections, we just noticed that more time was being sent in them. That's the increase there. That's not a necessarily a step increase thing. There might be some more hours allotted to that. The chips for road materials. So we do a lot of the general road improvements, including the capital improvements under this. Materials are up significantly. They're up another 10% this year. They were up at least 10 to 20% over the last 2 years. So we're probably 30% more than 3 years ago. So we're going to shift some of that CHIPS funding that we get from other agencies to start to cover the cost of these materials. Everything from our chip seal program, which is our preventative maintenance program, to our capital improvements, which is the full-on street design that you can see on Hightower Way right now, which is replacement of gutters and pavement, basically curb to curb, all brand new. All of those materials are significantly increased, a minimum of 30%. So as some of the lines you'll see for materials when you go down through are kept fairly flat, just because we have limitations within the budget of how much we can increase, we're having to offset with this CHIPS funds. So you see that go up from 8,000 to 100,000. It's to cover material costs primarily within these sections. Even with that, there will probably have to be quantity reductions in 2023 as far as our programs. The cycles we're on and different things, with a 20 to 30% increase in the last 2 years and a 2% tax cap. And it doesn't really do any good to increase these budget amounts so we have more material if I don't have the people to put it down. So we're trying to stabilize the employees so that we have enough staff to definitely cover in the winter and to be able to do this work. Once we have the staff balanced out, we could begin to look at budget increases to increase materials to get the quantities back up. But bottom line right now with the restrictions, we're going to have to reduce basically lane miles of roadway that are worked on in order to keep this anywhere near. As you can see with some of these values, they're too large to increase by 10 or 20%. So that's a big challenge right now with making sure we don't have roadways that start to deteriorate faster than our current programs allow. But we're continuing to work at it. The guys are working really hard to get stuff down. They've done a great job this year, like I said, with the additional work we took on with the county of getting everything within town taken care of and addressed. Overtime and all that type of stuff. They've done a fantastic job making that happen. But with the dollars and cents of materials cost, it's going to have to be reduced moving forward, at least in a small amount for at least now. Hopefully we can work out of that. So then we move into the fall leaf pickup season. In there you'll see the labor increased. just based on last year's end of the year data, we needed a little bit more labor in there to cover that service. There was a lot of overtime last year though, because of all the leaves falling late. We actually went 7 days a week for a few weeks there, just because all the leaves came down all at once, and it was pretty late in the season, and we didn't want to leave any more out there than we had to. So that's the leaf pickup section. Snow labor slightly increased. This past winter was pretty snowy. This past winter we had a lot of instances that we talk about pretty heavily where it's snowing, so we go out there and we salt, and then it just snows a little bit and it snows a little bit, so you don't see a ton of accumulation, but in order to keep it from building up or icing up on the roads, our trucks have to be out on the road doing preventative work. That caused quite a lot of labor cost over the winter. So that's the slight increase there to try to account for that if we should see that type of weather pattern again. Move down to services to other governments. Those are going to remain pretty much the same. Those are compensation for different things that we do for Monroe County, brush and weeds. A couple of these, they are starting to adjust at the county and state level as far as the compensation they provide to us by a certain percentage, because they do understand that fuel costs and different things are going up. So some of those lines are starting to slowly adjust to account for that, as you can see there. Employee benefits, Paul, that's more in your...
Employee benefits, we actually kept them fairly flat year to year overall, but retirement actually is expected to go down a bit based on projections. Workers' comp fairly flat. Hospitalization, as I said, there's an increase, but this budget line in 2022 had some excess in it, so we can actually budget a decrease even though we're expecting a 15% increase, if you can follow that. Retiree medical insurance, the highway has had quite a few retirements in the past year or two. So, and they retire with, many of them retire with health insurance benefits, so it's driving that cost up. Even though that retirement medical insurance has been rebid recently, so we're seeing some relief on the premiums, but we'll see how that plays out. In the revenue section, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, this is where the other portion of sales tax revenue is credited. 92% is being allocated to the highway part-time fund, so we're budgeting $4.4 million. As I said, it is trending up. So for now, the highway department's benefiting from that increase. And Pat, you can speak to some of these other revenues.
Yeah, so a few of these, it's going to be very similar reasoning to the revenues that we saw in the other fund. The first line there that increased by $100,000, services to other governments, our Monroe County DOT work. They seem to have a very healthy budget for work. This year we're working on 7 projects with them, primarily in town, State Road, Lake Road, gravel road, some projects big, some small. But based on the trends we're seeing right now, that should continue. So we increased that revenue number by $100,000. This year we'll exceed that by quite a bit. So I still feel that even at $200,000, it's conservative. We kept things pretty much the same. Labor to others is sometime internal here with the town. I don't find that we were tracking quite as high with that number, so we reduced that. The Monroe County Snow and Ice is being consistent on both of those lines. That next line there with its $25,000 that didn't exist last year, that's the other portion of the Monroe County Parks work. It was also significant this year, which we're working on capitalizing right now. So I have it in there very, very conservatively for next year, but it does tie into the fact that I don't want to do quite the same amount of the quantity. But that particular line this year is going to be realized at about $178,000. So we put it in for $25,000 next year, which should be very conservative. And again, does help this revenue section and the fund overall when it comes to some of the stuff we're facing with cost increase for operation.
There's the other side of that $500,000 transfer that we spoke about when we were discussing the Highway Townwide Fund. There's an expense in the Highway Park Town Fund. So it's actually overall, since sales tax revenue was increased significantly, the current budget has the amount to be raised by taxes actually dropping by about $500,000. And I think we just have drainage now.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to do questions on that section
Yeah,
first or
any
not.
questions?
Is
No, I just had a question regarding, staff applications. I know there's a lot of competition out there, generally for, like laborers and that sort of thing. And I know I talked to Joe Herbst about the starting wage salary, because you've got fast food stores starting out at $16, $18 an hour. What are you seeing as far as your applications go, incoming? Based on your starting hourly rate?
We did a couple of things last year for that starting rate. The current contract has 4 levels of laborers.
Right.
The 4th level was down in that $16 an hour range where we're starting people, and everybody gets in the door because nobody coming in has experience with Webster Highway. So, you kind of start building your experience that way. Last year we made an adjustment mid-year due to basically being understaffed, that those budget lines had dollar values in it. So to help curb that, we put together a package and a plan where we increased everybody internally up 1 step to move to the 3rd step instead of the 4th.
Right.
So that we could start hiring at that 3rd step. That jumped it to, at that time, I believe, right around $20 an hour.
Right.
And I think we're up over 21 now with that same step due to the COLA increases year over year. So we're at about 21 where we're hiring right now. We're getting an all right response. We're getting folks that want to work for the most part. The people that are coming through with skills already that don't have to be put together are very minimal. Where at a time, I think when you were hiring at $21 an hour, you were getting an experienced laborer that probably had at least a couple years of experience in the field in some way or shape or form. Now you're really not seeing that. I think if you have much experience and whatnot, there's places where you can go a little bit higher than that. We still have a very good merit program. The contract, the way it's set up now, allows these people to develop skills and move up higher than I think 95% of places can get you. So you might be able to start higher now, but you may stay there at that level for a long period of time, where we have a predetermined system through the contract
I'm
that
really
allows
glad
you
to hear you
move
made
up.
that adjustment, though. I'm sure that helped out a lot.
Yeah, it was.
Because it was very low.
It wasn't done for no reason. It wasn't done for face value. It was done because, the applications weren't coming through the door. Yep, 100%.
Absolutely. Great move.
Yes, that was a team effort for the supervisor and everybody else to get that put together, Paul especially, to make that happen, and it has helped. We still have quite a few applications. During the summer, not so much though. A lot of the people in our field are working. They have a job, they're set, they're happy with it. They're probably not going to send in an application. Over the winter, is when people tend to want to make transitions. Right now, I need to get some more people in the door in order to be ready for winter, so I don't really have the option to wait as long as to when the big pool will come in, but we'll continue to try to capitalize that in the off season to be ready for the next year. But it's kind of always a long lead time process, especially when we're training the guys to plow. And that takes at least 1 season, probably two, to be efficient. It's a much longer lead time from when we do the hiring to when.
You're only running one guy in those plow trucks. Where
it's a good thing.
A lot of places are running two. They have a wingman.
Yep.
I know the village has a driver and a wingman.
Yep. Yeah, that's the way everybody was for a time, and now a lot of the places have started to transition away from it. And it's probably a good thing they have, because if you had to have 2 people in every truck, I'm not sure what we'd do at our scale and size. So it'd be even tougher to have bodies in there. So anything else is good?
Thank
I'm
you.
good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
We'll jump over to drainage real quick,
Drainage, yep.
if I can find it.
So the most significant section of drainage is labor. Our drainage program, we've gone through a lot of different stuff with it, but the bottom line with that is there's more labor needed. We need more people, more bodies working on these crews in order to put a bigger dent in our list of projects, whether it be maintenance, general improvements, any aspect of it, stream restoration, pretty much everything we do in drainage, there's just a dramatic need to do more of it. So we're increasing the labor this year to include another employee. So that's the reason for the big jump there, is to put another dedicated employee in that section. And then everything else through there stayed pretty much on track. And then employee benefits saw some of the similar adjustments.
Same thing, based on history. Yeah, revenue, we've got fairly flat year to year. So, I mean, it's up 134,000 year to year, the amount to be raised by taxes.
Can I?
And we have increased the number of units.
Yes. You're getting to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go right ahead there, Paul.
Yeah, we increased the number of units that had been in the range of about 11,000 because we're looking at putting together a townwide drainage district, which would bring in more units, and rightfully so, which would provide the revenue to fund additional labor.
Correct.
And
That's
the rate per household stay about around $40.
Yep, which is actually a
Same as last year.
slight decrease to last year. I think it was 42 last year, so by adding the houses, we're able to decrease it slightly. We came in and did the presentation on the townwide drainage district ways back, so that's actually up on the website that somebody can go and review if you want some more detail about what Paul is talking about. But the broad strokes is there's currently about 78% of the town in a drainage district where you pay a fee annually to make sure that your property, surrounding areas, roads, and everything are able to drain all the way to the lake. So it's our major water courses throughout the town that we have maintenance on. So to have 78% of our residents paying and 22% not just doesn't make sense at this point. All of the drainage from their properties flows to the same places. So it really makes sense to have our consolidated district cover all of the residents at this time so that we can better address some of the issues that are coming up.
Yeah, and I mean, over the next month or so, the legal process and public hearing and all that, and Charlie's not here to talk to it, but we're assuming it'll move forward. That's why this tentative budget proposal shows 100% of the residential units and consolidated the townwide drainage district. So just in case anybody watching at home, like, hey, wait, how'd you pull that off without the legal process? We haven't gone through the process yet. We will be. Stay tuned.
So your drainage labor went from, in 2022, from 200,000 to 316,000 in 2023, and that's one employee?
No, that's the lion's share of the two. So you
Okay.
notice the decreases. So we did that based on the increase of houses and the rate per house that we just said.
Right.
So there's a certain amount of increase based on the townwide that's going to go in here. We utilized all that for labor. So 2 employees is more like 120 to 130,000.
Yeah, I thought,
So that,
I thought you said one employee.
yeah, so the difference between the 116 increase there and the 130, the other
Gotcha.
15,000 is
Right.
put into those other compensation lines.
Okay,
To-
thank you.
To net the 2 people.
Yeah, I just need a little clarification on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
I mean, Pat, you don't necessarily have people completely dedicated to drainage. It could be a mixture of people.
Not
devoting time to
100%,
drainage.
yeah,
I like it.
there's folks that spend the majority of their time
Right.
on it, but yeah, nobody's 100%
Right.
dedicated.
So this could be a mix of 10 other people devoting time to drainage over the year.
Yeah, correct,
Into that line,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, that 116,000 increase that you see there is just that many more hours
Yeah.
that we can dedicate to it
Exactly.
with current staff
So
and
you can't
potentially
say
new
that
staff.
equals these 5 employees or whatever.
No, that's.
It's a mix.
Yeah, that's an oversimplification
Yeah.
of
So
how
that's
that'll
why.
actually function. Yeah, to say that it's 1 additional or 1.5 additional
Yep.
employees, you're right, that's
Yeah,
an
your employees can
oversimplification.
work on 5 different expense
Yeah.
lines in a day. across 3 different funds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep, and our admin staff down there does a great job of keeping track of it, so it all gets in the right place, but, yeah, they're not very often doing the same thing
Right.
day over day, dedicated, like I may have alluded to. So, I think that's
That-
the last section.
Yeah, and you know,
I have.
it, like I said, actually, Councilman Abbott is not with us tonight,
Right,
but Councilman Abbott, Pat, Paul, and myself have been in a couple of meetings already that is about this 2023 budget, so I don't have any questions because, boy, I'll tell you, Councilman Abbott, he comes to play in those meetings, doesn't he?
it does. You get a lot of questions right out of the way.
Yeah, but he knows his stuff.
He
And,
does.
So I now know my stuff from that experience, but certainly John and Ginny.
No, I'm fine. I asked
Yeah.
the question I needed to answer
Yeah.
to.
Okay,
Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Pat.
all right. Thanks.
Very
Thanks,
good.
Pat.
Very good. Well, we seeped over a little bit,
Yeah.
but now we're gonna see if we can run the communications room for this while Karen comes out from behind the white curtain and presents. This is gonna be interesting.
Okay, there's really only 2 major changes to my budget for next year. They are my pipe dreams that I would love to get but don't expect to. But I wanted to at least start the conversation. One is the technician salary line. Right now, I only have 2, I would call them stipended volunteers. They do under 4 hours a week, if that, just helping me out with odds and ends, mainly on the publicity side and the video production side. They are not technically part-time staff, or full-time staff, so they do not have any town email address to where we can give them access to help me with the website or any of the social media platforms. So they are very limited in what they can do, and it's pretty much just the video production side. But it's been an issue over the years of I have no backup. If something happens to me, if I have an emergency, there's no one that can really do the job in my place. So, going down the line, future thinking, that will need to be addressed at some point. If not this year, then hopefully within the next year or two, we could at least maybe get part-time, one of them up to part-time level. Other towns that are similar to me in terms of the cable department have cable production assistants, either full-time or part-time. So that is a civil service title that we could utilize to just have, basically give me some support. Mainly it's just a backup. So if something happens, I have someone that can run the website, the social media pages, and the TV channel if I'm not there. So that's the biggest addition for my budget is that technician salary line, and that's just for one full-time staff. I currently have one of the, not even part-time staff, that has the television production degree and background to where that person could transition to full-time. They have the background to do the civil service title. The other main addition is under the website design and maintenance, and that is adding $14,000 for a complete redesign. We are very overdue for that. It should be done every 5 years. Our last one was done in 2016. So we are very overdue for one. If it doesn't happen this year, then it needs to happen eventually. The $14,000 covers a standard redesign, so it's not the Taj Mahal of redesigns. It's the very simplest one. But it also adds in 2 specialized department pages for Parks and Rec and Police. Those are our most visited sites, and so we really want to make them into standalone pages. So this would give them a very unique landing page design that stands them apart from the rest of the website. Other towns do similar specialized headers, and it's really a nice design. It would give them
a lot more flexibility with all of the tools that they currently have on the website, because their departments are much more robust than some of the other ones in terms of how much is in there. So that accounts for a standard redesign, 2 specialized department pages. It also gets us into a 5-year contract so that we're not taking such a big hit every couple years that we want to do a redesign. So this starts us on a payment plan that in another 5 years, we would have a redesign paid off already. The last time they did this in 2016, they did a standalone payment, which is why we're not currently on a plan for renewals. So I would like to get us on one so that we don't have such a hard hit to the budget when we want to do a redesign 5-6 years in the future. So this accounts for that, starting in the annual payment, which would be about $2,000 going forward after this initial payment. I've started the redesign process already with our vendor, because it's going to take about 6 months just to do the audit of the entire website. It's about over 60 pages in a spreadsheet of all the things that need to be addressed and fixed, and so that's going to take easily 6 months. So this is not going to be a quick process. So if we can't get to it next year, then definitely we'll be ready in another year to do it. The last component of this website redesign will be changing the URL address. Currently, the ci.webster is just way too long. We already pay and own other URL addresses, one of which is websterny.gov, which is what we would switch to. But we currently have the ci.1 as the main routing address for the town. So we would need to change that routing process, and that's all part of that cost. We would not make that change until we do a redesign, because it would be a complete rebranding process, and I would not switch it without doing both at the same time. So that's the 2 biggest adjustments. The other equipment line is going to account for some changes in this boardroom, getting rid of the big screen and moving to individualized projectors on the board table for each board member, and having tables on this end for applicants to do presentations, where it would just be all broadcast to screens around the room. So that's more for planning and zoning, but that is factored into the equipment budget for next year to kind of go a little more high tech. Yes, one will be over there.
Big one over there.
But you'll have screens in front of you as well.
I'm going to put you over here.
That's fine.
So-
I'll bring in my binoculars.
But that's all.
Yeah.
That's it. Everything else is pretty much the same.
Yeah.
A little bit of increases based on just materials costs, but other than that, everything else is the same. So those are the only 2 big asks for this year.
Jenny and John?
Yeah.
Oh,
There they go. Ladies first.
Well, anyway, I would like to, first of all, commend you on what a wonderful job you do on the website. People have been saying that, you have posted the new events and everything on it, and for limited manpower, you sure do a good job.
Oh, thank you.
So-
Yeah, we've been trying to do a lot more with the upcoming events and the community groups, so, and it seems to be, based on the website analytics, they're doing really well.
I encourage
so.
them to send it to you.
Oh,
And
thank
you put them all up there.
Yes, I'm
So
getting a
thank you
lot
so much.
more community news and events, which is great for the newsletter, so, yes.
Thank you.
How does the website redesign go? So there, I understand you're working with an outside firm, but as far as the decision as to what that final design is there any like collaboration with any other department heads as this process is going on?
Oh, yes,
And-
it's, the actual design process is a good 5 months. And it will be collaborating with every single department to get their needs addressed for this redesign. It's not a quick process because
No,
of that.
I understand it's gonna take a while. I just
Yeah.
want, my, not concern, but my question was, there's gonna be more than one person involved in making that final decision.
Yes.
But I'm glad to hear that the department heads will be involved in that design process, though.
Yes,
So it will be
especially
collaborative.
especially Parks and Rec and Police, if we do those specialized department sections,
Right.
they will be the ones making those design choices of what buttons are in the middle that are
Right.
most highlighted, what sections they want, because there's options for putting news sections first or calendars first. There's a lot of different design choices that will be made by them, because they know better than I what their residents want from their site. So
Right.
that will
Great.
all be part of the design process. There's actually, it's like a 5-month process of every single step. And there is a whole section for just art design that will be all of those department-specific choices that will have to be made, yes.
Great. Thank you very much, Karen.
Well, because we've been here since 4:30, and believe it or not, in about 40 minutes, we have to have another board meeting, our regular board meeting. I want to tie this all up for the workshop portion, so we have about a half an hour break, so the people that'll be here until 8:30 or 9 can have a little dinner.
Thank
whatever.
you very much. Very thoughtful
But
of you.
I'm going to try to tie this up real quick with Karen. I got to tell you, this will be fun because I get a chance to do a little, the spin that you see out on social media and whatever. The bad news is the budget proposal is 64% increase from last year. Wow. What a shock and awe that Karen's budget is 64% more than last year. Now, the good news is that's only $60,000. So the reality is this, where Karen comes in and says, this is a wish list, pipe dream, I don't think it's going to happen. I got to tell you something. I want that to happen. I've said for 2.5 years we need to put a premium on communication in this town and how we interact and communicate with our citizens. So, Karen, I don't think it's a pipe dream. I really don't, as she chuckles. So we'll work with the board on that. So that's all I would have to say about the tying up of Karen's presentation. Karen did something that I really appreciated. She came to me about a month ago and showed me a 20-page PowerPoint that really was the why. And I like that. Here's the why. Don't just show me that you want to increase your budget by 64% and $60,000. She said, here's why. And it made a lot of sense. She saved us doing a 20-page presentation tonight. Thank you, Karen. But I will be working with the board if they haven't already seen that presentation and all, because as we move forward in this budget process for all the departments, there are things, that I just think we really need to stand firm on getting. And I think having a full-time communications person, that's important. And that's essentially what you're pitching there, Karen. Now, for the budget as a whole, now that we've gone through these 2 workshops, and I'm going to defer to Paul on this one to make sure what I'm asking or saying is not inaccurate. All the department heads have now presented. The budgets that they have presented as of August 4th, these are not adopted, but these budgets aggregate up to the point that if we can increase from last year, Paul, about 600,000 taxes and stay under the 2% state tax cap. Is that correct?
That's right.
Right now, is this aggregate budget of all these departments at an increase of about $1.6 million?
Yeah, that's right where it's at.
Okay, so I'll try to make this very simple. We either say, okay, everybody gets what they just showed. And if it's $1.6 million, I would imagine we go about 8% on the tax cap?
Yeah, it's about 8%.
It's an interesting proposition in today's day and age with inflation and all that. So I think we have a lot more work to do as department heads and as a board over the next, really the next milestone event in the budget process is the 26th, correct?
Correct.
Of August.
Correct.
22 days from now, the town supervisor files the tentative budget with the town clerk. Hi, Dolly. I'll be doing that by Friday the 26th. What happens over the next 22 days as far as how we reduce $1 million out of this aggregate ask or additional appropriations or whatever? There's a lot of things that can be done, but there's a lot of work to be done, I would think. So it's a long process. We started this process of the 2023 budget on May 10th. That's almost 3 months ago. And we're at about not even halftime, kind of.
Right.
You know, so it's an arduous process, but it should be an arduous process and a tough, thought-out, measured process. Because at the end of the day, I would argue, and John, I mean, I know you've been the mayor of the village, and Ginny, you're new to the board, but you could make the argument that the #1 duty of an elected town official on this board is the stewardship of the citizens' money. So we better take that seriously. And I think we do. So I hope that wasn't too long of a, I know, John, you say my preambles and my tying things up go long. Is that okay? We done?
You done?
I think I am.
Well done, sir.
Thank you, John. So we'll be going off air now in about 35 minutes or 40 minutes. The regular first Thursday of the month town board meeting will start at 7:30 tonight. So thank you for all that attended and watched live or are watching this tape.